1950s are often remembered as the golden age of supermarket retailing. By this time, the shift to larger, full-service stores was nearly complete, and supermarkets were expanding alongside the growing suburban population. In the booming post-World War II economy, Americans embraced a vision of living bigger and better. Spacious homes, modern appliances like state-of-the-art refrigerators and freezers, and other luxuries of the era were really taking off. This lifestyle perfectly complemented the supermarket model, which offered convenience, variety, and a modern shopping experience. The decade also gave rise to some iconic supermarket designs. A&P stores featured colonial-inspired architecture, while Safeway became known for its distinctive glass arch designs. The opening of a new supermarket was a significant event for many communities, often celebrated with ribbon-cutting ceremonies, bright, expansive buildings, and newspaper coverage. Some supermarket chains established during the 1950s have become enduring fixtures in the industry, including Food Lion, Trader Joe's, and Roundy's. These innovations in retailing marked a significant moment in the way Americans shopped for groceries, setting the stage for the supermarkets we know today. Yes, you did hear me say Trader Joe's has been around since the 1950s. It's only more recently that it has expanded to nationwide locations. It began in the 1950s as a small chain of convenience stores called Pronto Markets in the greater Los Angeles area. The name change happened in 1967. It was changed to Trader Joe's, and the first Trader Joe's market opened in Pasadena, California. The employees were also outfitted in those signature Hawaiian shirts. People in the 1950s generally spent a higher percentage of their income on groceries compared to today, even though the actual dollar amounts were much lower. Let's look at why. In the 1950s, the average American family spent about 20 to 30% of their household income on food. Today, that figure has dropped to about 10 to 12% for most families in the United States. Now, why the difference? First, it was post-war income levels. In the 1950s, average incomes were lower, so even though food prices seemed inexpensive compared to today, they took up a larger share of the family budget. There were fewer subsidies and efficiency gains. Technology, global trade, and government subsidies have made food production more efficient, reducing the cost of many items over time. More families were doing home cooking. In the 1950s, most of the meals were cooked from scratch, so staples like flour, sugar, and milk were purchased regularly. Convenience foods, which can sometimes cost more, weren't as widespread as they are today. Dining out was far less common in the 1950s, so nearly all food spending went towards groceries. Today, many households allocate a significant portion of their food budget to restaurants and takeout. Now let's go into a grocery store, and with us we will be armed with a typical family of 4 shopping list, just the weekly staples to make several meals for the whole family. And I have to say, looking at this list, it very much looks like what I buy on a weekly basis. I did not have to dig much to find some of the current prices because I know these prices. I buy them every 1 to 2 weeks. Now, the pricing that I am using is from a mid-price store, so not a Whole Foods. This is not organic items. It's also not generic brands. Now, yes, generic brands were absolutely available in the 50s, but at this time, with the rise of the supermarket and manufactured foods starting to come in, like Jell-O and cake mixes, women were being very heavily marketed to on these fancy new television sets, and many women's magazines would have recipes using commercially made goods. If you look back at the video I did, I'll link it here in one of the cards and in the description, the box cake mix or discontinued box cake mix video, you'll see many magazine recipes advertising these cake mixes and what you could do with them to make yourself seem special. And it was probably a lot of keeping up with the Joneses. You wanted to make the new, best, prettiest, most popular cake for your get-togethers with your friends or school children's parties. All right, let's go into the store. Our first stop, of course, is the produce department. Canned goods were huge in the 1950s. Vegetables, soups, and fruits were often bought canned because fresh options weren't always available year-round. Today, we have fresh produce from all over the world and, of course, frozen vegetables as a backup. Now, depending how old you are, you may or may not remember, there was milk and dairy delivery available until about the mid 1970s. I know we had a dairy delivery box outside our front door. It looked something like what you see here. So it's a thin metal box. I believe it was aluminum. It was lightweight with about a half-inch thick styrofoam lining inside, just to keep your goods cool while you retrieve them between the time of drop-off and when you went outside to collect your items. We also had a dry cleaning delivery service. My father had a suit and tie job, and about every 2 weeks, a UPS-sized silver truck would come around with the racks inside, and he would bring in my father's suits for that were clean and pressed. So that was a little bit different than how things are done today. Meat was a big deal in the 1950s, but it was simpler. Ground beef for meatloaf, whole chickens for roasting, and maybe some pork chops. Fast forward to today, and we've got boneless, skinless everything, plant-based meats, and pre-marinated options for convenience. Even rotisserie chickens have become a staple in many households. Let's not forget desserts. Jell-O was practically a food group in the 1950s. It showed up in salads, molds, and even main dishes. Today, desserts tend to be bakery bought or something quick, like a brownie mix. Though Jell-O nostalgia is making a comeback. What's your favorite flavor? Now here in the household cleaning items, you'll see bar soap in a 3-pack. Liquid soap was not available until soft soap kicked in our grocery store doors in 1980 and put themselves on the shelves. You can see the total overview for the price of a weekly shop in the 1950s versus today. The average family in the 1950s spent about $18 to $22 per week for groceries, and today, as you see, it's much higher. And although prices are higher today, the increase in wages along with lower food costs relative to income means people spend a smaller percentage of their earnings on groceries than they did in the 1950s. Tell me what surprised you the most in this video.